Okay, there we go. All right, birth and postpartum stories. And last week, we had such a great discussion, and I felt the sharing was really genuine and came through in a really good way when we centered ourselves in what is ceremony and what are the community roles and responsibilities for ceremonies. And we talked about a specific example of a sacred fire and something that's pretty omnipresent in a lot of ceremonies in Anishinaabe country. And we talked about how we can re-center or remember birth as one of those really important ceremonies, and how there are a lot of roles and responsibilities involved in supporting the person who's going through that, and how it's a really personalized form of ceremony and something that's really important for us to remember and reconnect to. And so to continue that trajectory and then to move into the next phase of life that naturally comes after that ceremony of life or the ceremony of birth, we have the postpartum period. And a lot of you have been doing this work long enough, and I've been working alongside many of you to know that postpartum, when you use that word, it has in the past, and maybe a little bit now still, been used as sort of like a shorthand or like an abbreviation for postpartum depression or other mood disorders. A lot of that has shifted a lot, I think, because postpartum itself, if we get back to the root of what that word actually means and the way that we use it in the realm of maternal and infant health, thankfully has shifted away from using it as a shorthand for postpartum depression and actually getting back to the root of what it means. Post just means after, and partum is the pregnancy. And so it is this specific period of time that is necessitated after every single pregnancy has ended, whether that has been via a birth, whether it's been a live birth, whether it's been a stillbirth, whether it's been the end of a pregnancy due to a pregnancy release or due to a miscarriage at any gestation. There is going to be a specific period of time following that pregnancy that is known as the postpartum period. And so when I say postpartum, think of that rather than what can be sort of colloquially used, meaning like, oh, I had postpartum. What they meant was I had postpartum depression or anxiety. We're really getting back to the root of what postpartum means. So just hopefully that would clear up the confusion on the terminology. The postpartum period is it is understood by many cultures around the world. Many land-based and kinship-based cultures still honor a specific period of time after a birth. And for this discussion, we're going to focus on, live births at term and everything else that fall in that spectrum of possibility. We just wouldn't have time for, although those things are still very, very important too. And we have resources for those other types of outcomes if anyone is interested. But the period after birth is recognized in a lot of traditional cultures. And in doing this work in Indian country, I have been able to be really privileged to hear stories about postpartum healing from lots of different tribal nations all across Indian country. And or I have a colleague in Arizona who says sovereign country. So I think that's a good word. Sometimes I use that instead of Indian country. But in Indian country or sovereign country, is just lots of stories about the amount of time that is honored for postpartum. What are some of the practices and protocols? Why do we honor a postpartum period? And so I'm hoping to share some of those stories and practices from my neck of the woods with you today. And maybe that will stir some memory for yourself as well. And with the complete understanding and acknowledgement that many people have not had the opportunity due to so many of the disruptions that our communities have faced to connect to a specific postpartum healing period. And it can feel a little tender, or it can feel a little distressing to hear about or visualize this, really loving and culturally rooted way of being cared for in the postpartum period, when so many of our community members and really generations of people haven't had the opportunity to do that. And so I just want to hold that space for the grief that can come up, or the disappointment that you can feel if you are one of those people that didn't get to have this, or if you're looking back and like, man, this could have helped me in so many ways, or holding on to that, the sadness that can happen. This really came forward for me in my second birth with Guillermo, and I was like just being so exquisitely cared for by my husband, by my mother-in-law. I had a postpartum doula as well who came and lived with me. And I remember like sitting there and just being so sad because I felt like my mom and grandma didn't have that opportunity. And I felt really, really sad, especially for my mom. Um, and I just felt a lot of grief, that I was getting to have this experience that I knew she didn't. And I just felt really sad for her. So the work can be, um, it can unearth a lot of feelings as well. So just want to give that acknowledgement. But we honor this postpartum rite of passage. And I shared last week that I like to categorize things and I like to organize them in my mind, and I like to have language and frameworks to talk about things and explain things because that's just how I think. And when I teach others, I like to share that as well. And so I came up with, I did some research and some synthesizing and came up with some language to talk about what is a rite of passage and what does it mean for postpartum to be a rite of passage? Like, why do we even say that? We have other rites of passage ceremonies in our culture. Some of you may have gone through them or have been present for them or may be aware of them, but rites of passage that are traditional to our culture, including our puberty and coming of age ceremonies and first menstruation, the first hunt for our young girls and boys, or young men and young women. And there are other rites of passage within the dominant culture that are recognized, that are pretty much universally understood, such as graduation from high school and college, getting married, buying your first home. So these are like the rites of passage that we go through in our lifetime. Postpartum is for the birth giver or the life giver. I have a mentor who says that instead of just like the mom, because it's more inclusive, but it also is more like um, it's more honoring of the role of being a life giver. And so she says life giver. I use that term in um, because that's what she said to use. So that's what I mean by that. The life giver. So it really is a rite of passage that has in many ways been like kind of diminished, or the word I wanted to use was demolished because it kind of has been. If you think back into like, some of the historical traumas and um, oppressions that our people have faced, and the reasons why we are disconnected from these rites of passage and from these traditional ways of being. And so I tried to give some language back to what this rite of passage means. And I even went into like some academic literature and was like, in other cultures, like within this realm of knowing, what do other cultures say about what makes a rite of passage? And if anyone has anything to contribute, please do. But this is what I came up with. One is a rite of passage helps us make sense of ambiguity. So there are always times in our life when we are like stepping into the next phase of life. We're not yet there. We're sort of in this space in between. And in our first session, we talk about birth as being that space in between worlds. Literally, it's the space in between life and death. It's the space in between Anishinaabe Aki and the spirit world, earth and the spirit world. And postpartum is like this. We're still in that space and everything's still kind of open and like a little wishy-washy, and the feeling of being really easily connected to the spirit world is still very, very strong and very possible in that postpartum period for both the newborn and for the birth giver, because newborns have that opening in the top, and because the entire body of the birthing person is open due to the physiological and spiritual changes that they're going through and that they have gone through in their birth ceremony. So the uterus is open, the portal to the other side is still open and still in that healing state. And there's still this sort of landing that needs to happen. That means like the postpartum person is in between this role that they used to have, the life that they used to have, and what is yet to come. They don't know what that's going to be. That's still unfolding. The knowledge, the wisdom, the lessons that are to come are still unfolding, and we don't know what that's going to be for them. So there is this space of ambiguity. Like you don't know what it means to have this child yet because you've never had them yet. And you don't know what it's like to be a caregiver to this new human being and how that's going to look, feel, and be experienced by you because you haven't done it yet. So a rite of passage is supposed to be a gentle place for us to be supported, to be mentored, to have really culturally rooted, very loving and nourishing care to hold you while you are sitting in that place of unknown. And it is to help us make sense of it that we exist and our safety and caretaking is dependent on the people around us. So, this is a very culturally rooted way of thinking about things. It's the interconnectedness of us as a people, meaning that we have to do more than just think about it. It actually requires action. It requires the community support and community wraparound of a new family in order to take care of them during this time. A rite of passage also grounds us in our new reality, meaning that um, our identity and what is to come next, we don't know what that's going to be yet. A rite of passage gives us the spaciousness to explore safely what that is going to feel like and how it's going to be for us. And if we think about other rites of passage ceremonies like coming of age ceremony, we don't know what adulthood is going to feel like. We don't know what that new identity is going to mean for us. We know we're not little kids anymore, but we're not yet grown-ups. Sometimes people kind of perceive of our coming of age ceremonies like we're kicking our young ones out the door and now go, you're on your own, you're a grown-up now. You leave that little girl behind and now you're big. But there is this gentle space that sometimes we're missing that's in the middle where we're like, we're not there yet. We're still in the passage. And so a rite of passage is meant to um, help us like stay safe and stay grounded in this new reality. In the postpartum period, literally, it is to like bring that person back to earth because they're in this open space. They could easily like go to that other side. And so we, as an Anishinaabe, we had understanding of maternal mortality and how to prevent it always within our culture because we have language to describe how we can keep someone safe and keep them here. And literally, it's grounding them here in earth so that they don't go over there. We know because we have in our language stories and ways of describing the spirit world as being this place of pure light and just perfection. There's no illness, there's no sadness, just everything good is there. And we know here in our realm on this earth, there's a lot of difficulty and there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of challenges that we're going to face as humans. It would be all too easy for us to like want to go to that other side if that is wide open for us to step into. But we don't want that to happen in this postpartum period. Like your life here isn't done yet, your work has only just begun. And so we're grounding that person back into the earth while that space comes to a close gently, as their body heals and their body closes, their uterus comes back to size and stops bleeding. At newborn seals up on top. It takes time and it can't be rushed and it can't be forced. And all we can do is our best work to support them and to keep them safe. So we're literally introducing elements from Mother Earth to them through our traditional practices to hold them here and to remind them that Earth is still a really good place to be. And so stick here with us. So we are grounding them in this new reality. A rite of passage is supposed to provide a space for mentorship and guidance. And I bet a lot of us are like, man, I could have used that in different kinds of rites of passage that we've gone through in our lifetime. But hopefully, we can create space for people to be gently mentored, to have that guidance, to have that you know, loving and humorous and sometimes no nonsense way that we do as Anishinaabe help each other out and teach each other and work together. And that is something that I think is still present in a lot of ways in a lot of Anishinaabe families when people are going through this postpartum rite of passage, that they have that elder in the family or that older generation who are teaching them. And so there is this opportunity for intergenerational healing and connection that can happen as well. And I always think it's really great. And I've gotten to see at times where young ones who aren't there yet are still listening and still observing and taking things in. So it's passing down knowledge, not just to the next generation, but sometimes to the next generation. Rite of passage creates a container for emotions, meaning there's so much to be experienced. There's so much flowing out of someone who's going through ceremony. There's so much uncertainty. There's excitement. There's, um, feelings that you may have never even felt before after you have given birth. And to have a space and to have someone safe who can just sit with you and witness you while you go through that is a very important piece. If we do what we do in the dominant culture and we kick somebody out of their room, 24 hours after they've had their baby, and we just send them home with no support, and you're on your own now and you chose this, so go ahead and do what you wanted to do. And they're going to the store and going back to regular life, and now they just have this little baby, then they're not really having the space to process their emotions and their experience. They don't have the space to express it, certainly. And that can lead to a lot of difficulties and a lot of imbalances and maybe even some resentment towards that experience for people. Whereas our traditional rites of passage are actually given space for them to express themselves freely and to just be in their bodies while they go through this really important spiritual experience. Skipping over that or trying to rush through it isn't very supportive. And ultimately, a rite of passage is a welcoming into the next phase of life. So it is to provide a sense of belonging and identity. And I've heard a teacher, and I think it was Marlene Surratt, who talks about the rights of the Anishinaabe child. And one of the rights of the child, like we have our own Bill of Rights. for all of our children. And one of them is a right to know who you are, a right to belong to your people, a right to know your name, your clan, your colors, your family, a right to be connected to who you are as an Anishinaabe person. And so a rite of passage is really our guarantee that like we care for each other unconditionally and that we maintain our connection to who we are from our land-based practices and from our kinship-based practices. So it's this sense of like welcoming that person in. If we think about it from the coming of age perspective, it's like we're welcoming that young one into our group. We're bringing them in, understanding that responsibility that we have for each other, and it's the guarantee that will continue for the rest of their life. So it's this soft and gentle, like I think I told you guys, I call it the baby bird. Like it's the baby bird, right? You're not kicking them out the nest, like you're holding them, right, until they're ready. And so that's what this rite of passage means. And I get this question all the time, and it's so interesting just the different ways that people think of this because the name of my organization is Postpartum Healing Lodge. And in some communities, there are actual lodges. And so sometimes people are like, do you have one? Like they think I have a postpartum healing lodge in my yard or something. I do not. But I thought I would take time to explain where does that name come from and the teaching behind it. And a lodge really in our culture can mean a lot of different things, but it is essentially your home. It's where you are. And so the postpartum healing lodge is wherever you are doing your postpartum healing. And it's my work to come to you, not the other way around. And so my work, the way I see the work of an Indigenous postpartum doula, is to come to where you are, whether your family has gone home and your postpartum healing lodge is your home. Whether it's an actual birthing lodge. I've worked with families who have traditional birthing lodges and they'll spend some time in the birthing lodge for their postpartum healing. And that's a really different and really wonderful experience to be privileged to be a part of. It could be that your family's in the NICU, and so your postpartum healing lodge is now somewhere else, and we have to make some adjustments to ensure your safety and care in that space. So the postpartum healing lodge is like where you are, the safe place for you to have undergone this rite of passage in the roles and responsibilities of the community that will hopefully be supporting you during that time. And I see Indigenous doulas being one piece of that. Not all of it, right? We can't do it all, but it requires a community wraparound support for the family. And that healing lodge is also the body of the person who's gone through that ceremony because there is, housed within this lodge, the spirit of that person. And so much of our work in postpartum is protecting that person's spirit and protecting their body so that it doesn't go into that other side, so that it stays here. So it is that gentle closing, that gentle nourishment, the care and safekeeping of the birthing person to help them stay grounded in this place and to help them succeed and prepare for what is next to come. And of course, this all sounds probably very different than the way that postpartum healing is approached in dominant culture, meaning Western, white culture, in the ways that have been imposed upon our people through historical trauma and cultural displacement and land and culture loss. But we are in this place now where we have this really amazing opportunity to reclaim and to reimagine and to return to those traditional practices. and to incorporate them into the lives of families in a way that makes sense to them and is tailored to and customized to their experience. So that's really the work of an Indigenous postpartum doula. And to reclaim this experience is to ensure that the birthing person is loved, that they feel honored, that they know they're cared for, that they're celebrated. And how many of you can think of families in your community or identity groups that are not celebrated in their parenthood, or that actually feel stigmatized or shamed because they have had a child? And when we're thinking about those who are more oppressed or more marginalized, this becomes even more important, and the work gets even more difficult. So that celebration that all families deserve can be extended even to those to whom may be culturally marginalized or stigmatized. We want families to feel protected. We want them to know that they're safe, that they're going to be well fed. We have some teachings about our traditional foods I'll get into in a minute. We want birth givers to be free of pain and infection. We have sort of just accepted, real distressing types of experiences in postpartum, not only normalizing them, but then also making them invisible. Um, and like I say in my classes a lot, like the worst kept secrets about what it feels like to have had a baby, and all the things that come after that, especially from that physiologic perspective, and many times in the mental and emotional perspective as well. But we can minimize that, and we can create spaces where there's safety. We want families to feel less stressed. We want them to actually have increased vitality. There is a saying, and from a teacher that I got to learn from, who says that that a birthing person should be so well cared for and so honored and so nourished from their postpartum healing period that they can actually leave the postpartum healing lodge feeling better than when they went in. And I went through this several times when I had all of my children. I have never, and probably will never again, get the opportunity to rest and to just be happy and be fed by others and be totally 100% cared for by people around me. And then when you're done, there should have been some healing and balance that came back to you after that. So you can actually reduce nutritional deficits, you can reduce fatigue. If that person is given enough care and support, they can actually have more vitality going into the next phase of motherhood after they've had that period of time to be fed and to be cared for and to be nourished by the people around them. Body feed with ease. A lot of our practices are supportive of breastfeeding and human milk expression, and there are lots and lots of intersections as to why that happens. And all of that is, of course, protective of the number one traditional food, human milk. We want people to feel grounded. We want them to be able to bond with baby, to learn how to bond with baby. It doesn't always come 100% naturally right out the gate. There is also a rite of passage in getting to know another person and like what it means to engage with them and to interact with them and how to be a parent. So we want that to happen for people in the timeline that feels right and safe to them. We want people to feel like they're safe to express themselves and that they can be in touch with their humanity. And what I mean by that is to be in a space where they can cry, they can ask their questions, they can express their joy, they can express their frustrations, that they can have a safe listening ear and someone who can validate and affirm for them and provide the resources to them that they can feel safe and successful. Okay, first, traditional foods. We have in a lot of our ceremonies certain foods that are prepared that are customary to our culture, that come from our land, that carry stories of who we are, where we come from, what we have gone through, and what is important to us. Our values and our stories are contained within a dish. And so traditional foods are very, very important. If you've been to like um, a full moon ceremony, you know, that there's certain things you eat that are prepared, that are given as offerings to the fire, and that all of us eat in the ceremony as well. If you've ever been in if you've done your fasting or if you've been supporting a fasting ceremony, you know, when that faster gets out, there's certain things that they eat first and drink first. And then there's traditional meals that are prepared to welcome them back to eating and drinking after their fasting. Um, you know, when you get out of a really good sweat lodge and there's just all those really good foods that have been prepped. So they're just traditional foods that are customary to a lot of our ceremonies that can also be introduced into the ceremony of birth or the postpartum rite of passage. And there are a lot of reasons why we do this, but some of the ones that are familiar are fish. And we actually have some teachings in our culture about fish being the first food that is given to somebody who has undergone a really huge transformative ceremony, especially ceremonies of life and death. So, someone has gone through a funeral. If their loved one is the one who has passed on, then the fish is supposed to be the first thing they eat after that funeral. And it is to bring them back. It's to give them such an important piece of our culture and our land and our water that it keeps them here on the earth. And so, fish is what I've heard from many elders in our community, also a food that is given in postpartum. And it could be the first food for somebody, like literally after they had a baby, the first thing that they would eat is some fish. We also have fish broth and fish head soup. Now, I've had some really funny conversations with people in community because fish is such a big part of our culture up here in the UP, and many families have really strong feelings on it, sometimes one way or the other. And I always ask and never assume that Anishinaabes love to eat fish because many do not. I had one client when I first met her, we we were having just such a great conversation and we were laughing like so hard. We were at a coffee shop and I swear like we were just crying because she was talking about how her family were fishermen and she just like repulsed by fish. She was like, please don't make me anything with fish. And she was talking about like stories from her family and just fish being like everywhere in her house and she was just so tired of it. But for those who are amenable to that, to whom it tastes good, then fish and fish head stew or that broth that's made with the bones is going to be a really important food. And my daughter's pretty much over like fish soup by now. She loves the fish soup, but she doesn't want any like heads or anything visible in the soup. She's like, don't ever surprise me with fish head soup. Like, okay, I will not. But then I have other people that are like, I'm going fasting and I want fish head soup as my first food when I come out, and can we make it together? And I'm like, yes, we can. It'd be the biggest honor ever. So fish being one of the really important, culturally important foods to our people. Corn and hominy, you know, if there was a close second, it would definitely be corn and hominy. It's just so central to who we are as a people. Such a really amazing resurgence of knowledge around how to grow and process and cook corn to hominy and all the different varieties that have been brought back into our community that have been protected, by those seed keepers and knowledge keepers around the food. Just so important. If someone was a vegetarian, then I would do a lot of corn for them. Or if they didn't like fish, then I would go with something with corn or hominy as their first bite of food. And same for beans and squash and pumpkin. They kind of all go hand in hand. We have our teaching about the three sisters. They're, uh, more accessible during certain times of the year, but have a really long storage life. And they're the foods that are just so culturally relevant to us that are really meaningful in a lot of our ceremonies. And I've been in ceremonies, where someone would specifically request that certain things are prepared. And people usually want homemade beans at ceremony. Wild rice, our monomen, you know, such a such a special food. It's even hard to like put into words what it means to us as an Anishinaabe, having such a central role in our origin story and in our migration to the Great Lakes. Um, a food that can like bring people back, from the brink of death, something that has been um, really carefully protected and revitalized across the Great Lakes region, and just a lot of work that goes hand in hand with the resurgence of language and culture is also being reflected in the work that's done to revitalize our food systems. So, wild rice being really, really central. One of the first dishes that I always make for a family for their first meal postpartum is baked whitefish and then a wild rice casserole on the side with some maple syrup and maybe some pecans. Berries also being really central, lots of different ways to cook them and work with them to make them relevant for postpartum. Venison, so important. Venison it is something that, we're so privileged to have here. And it's always interesting when I work with people in much different environments than mine, and they're talking about venison, and I'm like, whoa, like I can't believe you guys have it too. I'm so surprised, but because it's so available in much of a sovereign country, it's something that's culturally really important for us. And we have our bone broth, we have a maple syrup, so many teachings about maple. Um, Something that is really important for those who are going through grief ceremonies. There's some teas that are made with maple syrup, that's for grieving tea. And then we have just lots of traditional herbs and also like regionally available herbs and culturally available herbs, and that can be used in food itself and cooked with, but definitely lots of teas that are prepared as well. And so, other than they're just really good and we love them, why do we care about traditional foods when it comes to postpartum rite of passage? There's so many reasons why. I've alluded to a lot of this already. Grounding that person back into Mother Earth, giving them elements of Mother Earth to remind them of who they are, to give them that sense of belonging. They're foods that are also very soothing and very healing to the body, mind, spirit, and emotions of the birthing person. So, a lot of physiologic changes, a lot of challenges that can happen, a lot of ways that these foods support the healing of the body and the closing of the body for the closure of that ceremony. And in accordance with our other ceremonial teachings, food is to be hand fed or, fed very gently um, by a loved one or even by a doula to that person in their postpartum rite of passage, especially that first bite. And I've heard it explained like this: the person has just undergone this immense ceremony of life and death. They literally crossed the threshold. They've gone down that pathway of souls. They've come back again. And we shouldn't underestimate the immensity of what it is to do that and how much care and safekeeping they will need to land back on this side. And so they're fed with a lot of reverence they are also treated like they're sacred fire. We talked about sacred fire in the first session. When you have sacred fire and you're doing your offerings there, we teach our kids that they don't run around, that they don't, shout. There's not, iPads and games by the fire. We don't just go up to the fire and yeet the food into the fire or to throw tobacco, right? It's like you put it in really carefully and you feed it like it's an old person. But we should be doing the same for people who are freshly postpartum. And so often when I'm working with families and they want to incorporate these traditions, they can do that with the food. And so I'll have someone in the family whose responsibility it is to have prepped those first traditional bites of food based on the menu of the person, like what do they actually want, make sure it's ready to go when they're ready for it, and that someone is going to be the one to give them that bite of food. And if there's no one who can do that, I will be happy to be that person as well. And so they're really supposed to be given a lot of care and love. And we do this for our people who are coming back from funerals as well. They're supposed to be treated with a lot of reverence and a lot of respect. So we want to bring those teachings back to the postpartum person as well. And a lot of times, there's some sort of like mystery or like overhyping of what can be done in the postpartum period. And if I could just leave you with anything, it's that we can all do these things. It's not mysterious and there's not some like special, medicine that we have as Indigenous doulas. We're really just helpers. And all of us can step into this role and responsibility. When I think about the most nurturing postpartum care that I've ever received or provided to others, I think about this mom, this just really beautiful mom. She had a birthing lodge at her home. It was the first traditional lodge had been in her community in many years, not too many, but many. And and she had her baby and she went back into her house. I think about myself and another Indigenous doula who was there to support them. She was like preparing food in the kitchen and getting all those things ready so that this woman could go to bed and have her baby there and just like be cared for. Um, and I remember this like amazing moment where she was getting off of the toilet. And so I was just helping her up, and pulling up her pants. And she was like, I just need you to brush my hair. She's like, before we do anything else, can you just brush my hair? And so we just like sat there and we just brushed her hair and we braided it. And that was like such a special and important moment. And I remember feeling like in my own postpartum, especially after my very last one, I was so overwhelmed by my hair. We have so many teachings about our hair in our culture and lots of different ways of thinking about it and um, like engaging with or embodying what our hair means to us. And I remember feeling like it was way too much responsibility to care for my hair. And I was like, and I just put out on Facebook, I was like, can any woman in the community come and help me wash and brush and braid my hair because I literally cannot do it. And I did get some help, and my husband supported me a lot with that. I would have him brush my hair every day and braid it because I just couldn't do it. It was so hard to just lift up my arms and like to detangle everything, and it was just really overwhelming. And so postpartum care doesn't have to be this huge thing. It could be so simple and sweet as just brushing somebody's hair and putting that braid in for them. It could be applying warming and pain relief traditional medicines. We have a lot of traditional medicines that can be used, like our bear grease or our minigan that can be help bring warmth and circulation back to the body after birth, to relieve any sort of achiness that can happen. But having a baby is not, nothing. It's not nothing. Like that's a pretty big deal. And there's a lot physiologically that's happening, but we have a lot of those pain relievers available within our culture. And sometimes we just need that extra set of hands, or sometimes two sets of hands, to get those medicines onto the body to help that person out. And I would even do that in their hair sometimes. If somebody had like some bear grease or something that they wanted to be protective of their hair before we did the braiding, then I would do that for them too. But often, like on the lower belly or on the lower back, can feel really good. Someone has to make the food. So we talked a lot in our first session about the roles and responsibilities. So someone has to do the kitchen work, right? And like I shared from my abuela, she says, pray with your hands. If you're able to grab something and make yourself useful. So she always says that to me. So I try to be that person and model it for others. Like someone has to be there to do the food, and it can't be the birthing person because they're not supposed to be up and dealing with all the food and doing all the prep. It's too much for them, and it's not culturally in our protocols. So we want someone whose job it is to do that. And this is one of the things that I'll do with families when I'm planning with them is who's going to make the food. Often that's what I'll do as a postpartum doula, and I'll prep things usually in my own home and I'll bring it to them. Or sometimes um, I will do some of that cooking in their house as well. And those are really the memories that people remember. They don't remember like anything else that doulas do for them, but they will remember the food. And they'll like years later, I'll run into someone and they'll be like, "You made me that, bean soup or whatever." And I'm like, "I remember that. I do. I do." And I'm glad you do too. They do deserve this just gentle listening ear and just the presence. This is such a skill because in our, mainstream culture, dominant culture, we want to like do, and want to rush through things. We want to be productive because capitalism, all that. The ability to slow down and just to be present and to listen to somebody without having to rush to the next thing is some gentle medicine that can be provided for postpartum. And then the validation and affirmation. And my daughter always kind of teases me because I practice scripts a lot. Just as part of my neurotype, I don't always have like the right thing to say in the moment, have delayed emotional processing. I need time and then I'll think of it. But in the moment, I draw upon scripts a lot that I've practiced. So when you go through my trainings, I actually give you like a bunch of scripts if anyone wants them for validating and affirming, because the ability to speak back what you're seeing that's good in a person can help mirror for them what is good about them. And it can be a really affirming practice to them to know beyond just you're doing a good job, which we all want to hear, but doesn't teach us anything and doesn't like ground us in our reality. So I like to practice with people who go through my doula trainings on how to actually do validation and how to do affirmation. If you're not someone who can just like come up with it on the cuff. And then protecting oxytocin. And a lot of you probably already heard my rant about oxytocin in other presentations, but we do in the realm of maternal and infant health, especially in the world, we just treat oxytocin like it's totally optional. And it's like only in freaking America would we treat a life-saving hormone as something optional, or like if we get oxytocin it's just a happy accident or it's like a bonus, when really our entire maternal and infant health systems of care should be oriented around protecting oxytocin. We even diminish its importance by calling it the feel-good hormone. It really isn't. It's a life-saving hormone. It is a hormone that is protective of life. It prevents excessive bleeding. It promotes bonding. It is the thing that stops me from putting my baby in a basket and sending them down a river when they're crying. So it is actually extremely crucial to humanity. It is what like keeps me safe when I'm going through difficult times and learning how to parent a new human. And it is also crucial to the milk making process. So it is protective of that first traditional food. So we're talking about traditional practices and why they're so important to postpartum. It is because they are facilitating oxytocin. They are protecting of that life-saving hormone. And again, like only in America would we treat feeling good as an option. If all it did was help you feel good, that would still be very valid and very important. But it's not. It is also a life-saving hormone and protects the life of the newborn and of the birthing person. So that's my oxytocin rant for today. Moving on to special considerations for those who are in recovery or those who are experiencing or at risk for SED and OUD, a substance use disorder and opiate use disorder. One is the need for nutrient-rich foods. And I synthesize this from my experience in working with families, but I did also consult with a family that I had recently worked with and just asked a former client, is there anything that you remember that was really special or supportive to you when I was working with you as your doula? And she agreed with a lot of what was said here. Um, and she affirmed that these are the things that were helpful for her. And she was someone who was in a long-term recovery when she delivered. So the need for nutrient-rich foods, because physiologically, someone who's going through different types of medication management, not only the physical, reality of being postpartum, but there can be some additional just experiences and feelings and sensations and sensory experiences that can come with um, being on a medication assisted treatment plan, adjustments that need to be made in consultation with their care team that can just feel like they just need a lot of nutrient rich foods because they're just in this kind of weird feeling space sometimes. They can have like some sweating or just different kinds of temperature changes or just different sorts of um, feeling in their brain in response to some of the medications and the adjustments that can come after postpartum. So, as a way to mitigate or to minimize the harshness of that experience, nutrient-rich foods are especially important for somebody in that space. Advocacy and communication. We're going to talk at length about this in our last class. It's going to be an actual, activity where we're going to get to practice. What does that mean? How do we do it? Everyone says, "Do as a doula, you're an advocate," and I always found it so annoying that no one actually taught me how to do that or what it actually meant and what are some of those communication strategies that we can empower clients with because we're not there to speak for them or to speak on their behalf or to make decisions for them, which is what sometimes clients actually think we do. And I've had instances where clients are like, well, can you just tell them this? And I'm like, nope, I can't, but I can help you. And so we're going to get into some of those strategies in our master class, the fifth session of this series. Anticipatory guidance. This is the big term in childbirth education. It is helping people to plan for what might come so that they can have those resources at the ready. For someone who's in recovery or for someone who's experiencing SED, OUD, what this might look like is understanding their rights and resources, knowing what could be happening for them physiologically in the postpartum period, as well as how their newborn may respond to the experience. And we're going to go much more in depth into that in our next session. We're talking about newborn care, NAS, and NOWS, as well as early parenting skills and our newborn teachings from our culture. But families can often benefit from learning these things ahead of time. Like we talked about in our first session, those moments after birth aren't always the best time to just be loading a ton of information at somebody. It's going to be really hard for them to integrate it into their mind and into their memory. If we can plan ahead, that can lead to much better retaining of the information, or at least knowing what questions to ask. So anticipatory guidance can be really helpful, especially if you know a family is going to have some kind of case management or coordination. Often families in a medicated assisted treatment plan, or whose infants are going to be at risk for NAS or NOWS, are going to have some case management that's going on. They're part of the MOMS program. So just understanding what that's going to look like, and um, knowing what their rights are, what questions they can ask, how their healing space can be set up, and what kinds of things they have access to, so that there's no unpleasant surprises when baby is actually here. And then just being a part of the team. I find that doulas work better with the team rather than working against them. And I feel really strongly about this, especially when we're working in marginalized communities. Um, I see that a lot of times doulas come to the work because they're so passionate about helping those who've been oppressed that they can actually partake in isolation tactics between a person and their care team, but really that isn't helpful or supportive to the person who needs that care. And so I find that rather than like fighting up against the system, my energy is better spent supporting my clients within the systems that they're in, and knowing what questions to ask, helping them to know what's available, what their rights are, and how to effectively communicate them can go a lot further, especially for families who are already under a lot of scrutiny and who may feel like their choices are highly judged or highly stigmatized because of their history with SUD or OUD. And so for me, it's just always better to be, I wouldn't say pleasant, but at least a respectful part of the team, and to be just a gentle presence for my clients rather than going in with like a fighting type of energy. I'd rather nurses can call on me and have me be a helper, and I'd rather home visitors can know that I'm there and that I can work hand in hand with them, because we're all there for the support of the family, and we're all there because we care about them, right? And so we're all on the same team. And so that being said, thankfully we're just at the time where we can come out for some group discussion and we can do some reflecting as well, and I will see if there's any contributions from the group. And if you're going to watch this back on the recording, this would be a great time to do some reflecting activity with somebody else in your space, or to maybe just journal it out or voice memo, however it is that you like to do your reflecting. But for now, what I'm going to do is stop the recording, and I'll put these reflection questions into the chat box.